June is Audiobook Month. Join Viviana, the Enchantress of Books, and the Audiobook Lovin Series as she celebrates the authors and narrators who bring your favorite stories to life. Not only will this month be packed with exciting guest podcasts full of all things books, but stick around after each episode for some special information about this year's giveaway and more.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 9, Episode 21 of this year's Audiobook Lovin Series. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with actor, screenwriter, director, author, and narrator, Johnathan McClain. How are you doing today, Johnathan?
I'm good, Viviana. How are you?
Doing good. Did I get all the job descriptions correctly?
I think so. Yeah.
Mush.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I'm a multi-hyphenate, so for
Yeah.
sure. But I think you covered everything.
Perfect. Yay. Now, as someone that straddles several different roles in the industry, I feel you, and I'm like, yes, I'm not the only one. Because it's daunting sometimes. You're like, you're here as who right now? I'm like, I'm just here as me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's start with telling us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been doing all of this awesome stuff, and how you guys started.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I grew up in South Carolina. Kind of knew that I wanted to be an actor from a pretty early age. So I went to a performing arts high school, and then I actually started my career off in Chicago doing theater. And I sort of figured out that I wanted to write when I was doing that because I wrote a one-person show, and then that moved to New York, went off Broadway, and then I was doing theater in New York for years, and then I got on some TV shows, so I wound up in LA. And then about 10 years ago, I finished a series that I was on that I was, the lead on, which is wild, right? Like that's a fairly high mountain to climb, and it's not an easy thing to achieve. And it happened a little later than I was anticipating, but that it happened at all is kind of a miracle. And it was interesting. I've talked about this a lot, and it's like you climb this really high mountain, and I got to the top at least, and I looked around, and I was like, huh, okay. Well, that's not the view I was expecting. And not to say that I wasn't grateful or felt deeply privileged, because I was and I did, but I don't know. It just felt like, look, when you are an actor, you are at the end of the day ultimately still responding to other people's demands, right? There are, especially when you wind up in television, which is extremely corporate. You are the employee of a major corporation, and so I sort of came away from that experience feeling a little like, I wish I miss the days when I had control of everything. When I was a kid, I was 21 and I did a one-man show, and it was just me, and it was being scrappy, and I had control of everything. And it was around that time that I met somebody who was doing audiobooks. Really wonderful actor named Mark Deakins, who actually narrated a ton of books, but I think the thing he is most well known for is maybe the Maze Runner series. And I said, well, how do you get into that? That's something that I would like to do, it feels like. And he made some introductions for me, and I met some people at Random House, and finally got a chance to narrate some Jack Reacher novels, because back in 2012, when Amazon acquired Audible, they wanted to retroactively put every book ever written on audio. And Jack Reacher has a narrator, wonderful guy. His name is Dick Hill, but Dick had sort of gotten older as the character of Reacher had gotten older, and these were 3 early books, and they felt like Dick's voice was maybe a little old at this point in 2012, and so they went looking for someone to do the younger Reacher voice, and they said, would you do it? And I said, sure. And I did those, and it was great, and I fell in love with it, and that was sort of how I wound up getting into audiobook narration. And now 10 years later, or 10 and a half, I think I'm about to narrate my 200th or something. And then, to the point of multi-hyphenate, I finally, about 5-6 years ago, found this really interesting way of combining all of these things in one place, which was I narrated a series of romance novels by as I call her on my website, a titan of the romance novel industry. And she is named Julie Huss. J.A. Huss is her, writer name. I was really struck by how interesting and heartfelt and good they were. And I happen to know some people, some studios in Hollywood. And so I said, listen, and I'd written some stuff for TV as well, continuing my writing endeavors, and I'd sold a couple of TV shows. And I said, I think that I might have access to some really cool material to turn into a TV series. And I asked Julie directly, would you feel comfortable taking this on? And she was like, yeah, sure. And so we got her stuff set up as a TV show, and then we did not ultimately wind up getting it on the air, but through the process, we became friends. And then she said to me, and this is the last, maybe we didn't say this in the intro, the last part of my multi-hyphenate is that I'm also a best-selling romance novelist. And that happened because of these romance novels I narrated, got set up as a TV show. And then Julie said to me, I love the way that you worked with my material. Do you want to write romance novels together? And I was like, yes, why not? Apparently I say yes to everything. So let's do this too. Let's just add this to the list. And five years later,
Yep.
5 years and change later, we've published it. We have two more at the moment that you and I are recording this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We have two more coming out in the next 3 weeks, right before we attend Book Bonanza together, which is Colleen Hoover's big book convention in Texas. And we're going to be launching a new one at that convention. And yeah, and so that is the sort of most bullet pointy version of how it is that I came to do the things I do and what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, it's a long history there of work and skill sets that have been acquired throughout the years that has really been, I think, instrumental to getting you where you are now. I mean, because a lot of times when it comes down to the narration, a lot of folks think, oh, you just have to have a good sounding, AKA hot voice. And there's just so much more to it, regardless of the genre, right? People tell me
Oh
I sound
yeah.
good, is what people always say. People have told me I have a good voice. I'm like, yeah, but can you act?
Yeah, I think I mean, there's certain romance, fantasy, sci-fi, some of these genres, like when I'm there, look, if I'm narrating a book I just narrated a mystery novel for Random House by this wonderful writer called Linwood Barkley, and I've done a couple of his. He's a New York Times bestseller, and that one really is about quality and performance quality and everything that you and I are talking about. I do think that when you talk about genre, it helps. I mean, if you're a wonderful actor but you have a lisp or something, maybe romance isn't the thing that's going to be your specialty, right? Like, I think it's about figuring out where the combination of natural talents and gifts allied with the skill set that I think is important. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I will say, I mentioned those Jack Reacher books. If I could go back and do them over now, I would do it in a heartbeat, because I've learned so much about, like anybody, I suppose, who does a creative endeavor. You look back at your early work and you think, God damn it, I wish I had that one back again. So I'm at a point now, though, where I definitely feel like, okay, I have my footing underneath me. I kind of know what I'm doing, and I'm grateful that I've been able to work in a variety of different genres in audiobook narration too, because I feel like a lot of times people do get pigeonholed. So I'm really grateful that I still have the opportunity to do a variety of different kinds of novels, because I didn't get into this industry because I wanted to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I think that being able to do romance and then bounce into something else and then bounce back and forth keeps me excited about it. Because I'm sure, like anything, there's probably burnout. I mean, you've interviewed people who are real mighty. I mean, I know Scott Brick, for example. I mean, really, top of the game. And I don't know, I don't know how someone like Scott is able. I mean, and I say this acknowledging that he gives his all every single time. And I listen to Scott's books, and they're always the best. And I'm impressed at how he maintains his own enthusiasm after having done it for so long. And that's just about, I think, remembering why you get into this thing in the first place, which is you want to give someone a good experience. I don't think any of us set out to create entertainment. Certainly, if you're going to ask someone to listen to a book for your voice for 12, 14 hours, you want to try and give them something that they enjoy.
Yeah.
So, and I
But
think focusing on that is the way you keep your enthusiasm up.
yeah, I think being able to jump into something new or being able to try something is how you stay excited about what it is currently that you're doing. Otherwise,
Yeah, for sure.
it can become mundane. Because even if find the joys in what it is that you do, after a while you're going, I wonder what this would sound like, or do
Right,
this instead. And
for sure.
I think it's important, and us as listeners, we can tell when some of y'all are phoning it in. And it's
You
one of
can,
the
right?
yeah.
I've wondered about that. You can,
Oh
right?
yes. Oh, absolutely. It's there's some listeners that don't care and they're like, he still sounds hot or he still sounds good or they sound great still. Because even at that phoning in level, it's still decent. But for some of us, especially myself, I've been doing this now for 15 years as a whole,
Mm,
from listening to being such a lover of books and words and performance, that I also kind of get to know where those cadences are and kind of,
right,
where the hyperness kind of comes into place, a little bit of the excitement. And I'm like, bro, you're just phoning it in at
right.
this point. I'm like,
Sure,
why?
sure,
And it's sometimes it's busy schedules. It was just something that they didn't jive with the material itself. Because that's the other thing too. Um, I think when it comes down to audiobooks, you get to pick and choose. Maybe not so much at the very beginning of your career, but later on, you get to be a little more pickier about where you want to spend that time, and that also
for sure.
helps with keeping the enthusiasm about it. Um, but you
Absolutely.
but you've also delved into now both sides of the world of books, and specifically romance, because not only did you start narrating it, but now you're also writing it. Co-writing is a interesting dynamic in the sense of how that process works. Every co-author that I've spoken to, the processes, while they might be a little similar, also vastly different. What
Sure,
is
yeah.
your writing process look like with Julie?
With Julie specifically, and I'll say as an aside, I've now co-written a variety of things with a variety of people. Like I wrote a film that was out last year that I co-wrote with a friend who is an Academy Award winning screenwriter. So it's not like he needs my help,
Mm-hmm.
to get it done. So in the same way that Julie does not need my help to sell books, you know what I mean? That is not, and I think she's really special at what she does. So I think, with Julie specifically, I think the reason that, well, like I said, the reason I think we thought that we would be able to work together well is because she saw how I adapted her existing books when I wrote the TV pilot. And I changed some things because when you go to adaptation from book to screen, you always have to make some concessions. Sometimes things just aren't visual, and TV's a visual medium, film's a visual medium, so those kinds of things have to happen, and blah 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 blah. So she was very, my indication that we would get along well came from when I would approach her and say, may I change this? May I do this? Are you comfortable with this? And she wasn't really precious about it. She was like, yeah, sure. If you can, if you can defend for me why you need to change this and it makes sense, then, and it's going to make the story better, then yes. And I thought that that was a really generous and collaborative way to approach it. And so I think from my perspective, I was like, oh, this is a good partnership. And then when she saw what I did with it and that I tried to respect her work, I think she then, and also my voice, the way that I write. And I'm also a pretty good mimic, so I was able to sort of take her natural voice and blend it with what I was doing. And I think that on the heels of that, we were like, maybe there's a path forward here. Initially, like any initial partnership, you're figuring it out. When you're writing a male female romance, especially, and you're a man and a woman doing it, the obvious thing you're gonna do initially is you write the guy, I'll write the woman, and we'll, especially when it's first person POV, right? And you're alternating chapters. So basically you're just writing monologues for each of your characters. I say this in some of the author's notes for the books. The thing that was incredible about the first series we did together was it was an idea that I had based on a TV series that I had developed that never got made. And I was like, I think we can adapt it and make these characters romance heroes and heroines. And so, because it was my idea and it was something that was very personal to me, she let me rewrite her, which is incredibly kind and generous. So, a lot of the stuff that was in there was reshaped by me, or vice versa. If she saw something that she felt rang false, she would reshape it. And that's how we did it. So it was really, first pass, and then you get to make notes on the person's writing, or, if given permission, do some rewriting. And that was how that worked. And that's just kind of how we've proceeded forth. I will say these next two books that are about to come out, one of them that's coming out June 13th of 2023 is called The Circle, and it is the conclusion to a trilogy that we began in 2018. And of course, in self-publishing especially, it's unheard of to go 5 years between the second book and the third book in a trilogy. But I was off making a movie, and she was doing her own thing, and we just sort of had to put it on hold. And honestly, and she has been very open about this, which is why I feel comfortable saying it. She didn't write a word of it. Both of our names were on the cover because it was our shared work that got us there. First two books we did co-write, but the third book, she was like, I would love to give this to the readers. I just don't have time, and I don't really know where we would take it. Do you want to just do it on your own? And so this last one, co-written by us from a story perspective, because we sort of worked out the story beats and so forth together. But the writing itself, I just did by myself. So that's how that worked, which is unusual. And then another little secret that, again, she's been very open. She's an open, no pun intended. She's an open book, and I really also appreciate that about her. The other book is a rom-com that we were actually given a contract to write by our audiobook publisher. They requested us to write it, and they sort of had the germ of an idea, and we developed it from there. It's called The Row Bro, which of course is short for the romance bro. And interestingly, you'd think, because I am in fact the row bro, the bro writing row, that I would have written him. But Julie called me as we were about to begin writing, and she goes, "Hey, I have an idea. Do you want to write the woman this time, and I'll write the man?" And I was like, "Sure." So I wrote all of the woman's chapters. I wrote all of the heroine's chapters, and she wrote the hero's chapters in that one. So for us, it's been really fluid and fairly elastic. We just kind of go in the direction that I think we feel like is going to yield the best product and the best experience. The one thing we don't skimp on is trying to at least get a loose outline. Here's what I will say. I don't know if there are. I'm sure that most people who are going to hear this know the difference between plotters and pantsers. Plotters who plot everything, pantsers who just write by the seat of their pants. I don't know if you can pants it with a co-writer, because I don't know how if your vision for where a story is going is so vastly different, I don't think that would work. So we do try and lay a roadmap out and then go from there. But that's sort of been how it is. I mean, look, if I were, I don't think she'd say this, and it's never really come to this, but I would say that I've always seen it as, maybe it's not 2 votes to 1, but but I've always seen it as like she gets an extra thumb on the scale, 51-49, when it comes to decision making, because this is something that she is the expert at. In the same way that when I was writing screenplays with the two of us, basically my opinion got to win if there was ever
a tie,
a conflict. Yeah, a tie. Exactly right. I get the extra point. So when we're writing romance novels together, I'm certainly going to defer to her, because she is, wildly successful at it. And like any genre, there are rules, right? There are things that people expect, I think, out of their work. I even say this at the end of one of the first books we wrote together, which was when we began our first series. I said, okay, so listen, I want to write this sort of like thematic extended allegory about people emerging out of darkness and finding light and finding the cooling waters of salvation. And she goes, "Oh, so you don't want to sell books?" And I was like, and I said, I beg your pardon. And she's like, "No, all that stuff's great." She's like, "I think that's great. But like, where's the plot and what's the sexy stuff?" And I was like, "Oh, got it. Okay." She's like, "Because all that is important, sure, and we'll bake all that in, but let's get to the stuff that people who buy the books that I write are interested in." And so, I think that, especially once you're like her, and she's 10 years into her career at this point, and you built a brand, something I think she's very good about, and honestly has helped me shape for myself a lot, is the thing I said a minute ago about narrators. Who are you doing it for? Like, who are you creating for? Yes, obviously, you should find some satisfaction in it for yourself, because otherwise, go do something else. There are way easier jobs in the world. But I think maintaining a consciousness of, I'm not doing this to satisfy my own ego. I'm doing this to give people an experience that will satisfy them, make them feel happy, is an important thing to keep front and center. And she's helped me really refine that mode of thinking for myself. Because honestly, the actor ego isn't that at all, or at least it wasn't for me. The actor ego was like, you know, fuck the audience. I'm doing this one for me. This, um, and maintaining a real forward thought process on how can I give the people something, like, rather than what can I get from, rather than what can I get from this experience, what can I give to people, and being more generous about the way that you create art, I think, is a really valuable thing that's come out of my experience doing this, and that collaboration. And that's how we work.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was pleasantly surprised in seeing the dynamic between the two of you was how there weren't any egos really involved, as well as professional admiration for each other's work and friendliness, and because of the friendship that's there, but very respectful, and banter here
Yeah,
and there, and finding another.
yeah,
But because sometimes it happens where there's some lines that are blurred because people think that that's what the audience wants. I'm like, if you guys are funny with each other, great, I want to see that. If you guys have these little bickering moments, but it's all with respect, and I'm not second guessing that respect, I'm all for it.
right.
And so that's important too.
I will be. Let me be clear. Voices have gotten raised. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, there's a way to do that. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh
And I
yeah.
mean, look, it's not. we 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 did take 5 years off in between the last thing and this thing, so we needed a break from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny when we picked it back up. We just picked back up, like, bam, right where we left off. So,
Yeah.
and that's a symbol of a really something deeper than whatever superficial thing.
Yeah.
Some partnerships are formed, and I think we have. Julie once said we are vastly different, but in the ways that really, really matter, we are very much alike.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that's right.
Yeah, because if you guys were exactly the same, it would be very boring.
Yeah. And also, like, I don't want to be with myself all the time.
No.
I,
Yeah.
I do not.
No. I totally understand that. I think being able to collaborate in a way that is fun, but still understanding that, individualization. I mean, it's like having friends, that you can not hang out for years. And when you guys get back together, it's like you just talked on the phone yesterday, sort of thing.
Exactly.
It's like no time has left. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't mention about the screenwriting and things like that. And I was going to ask how that differs from writing books. I know you are and have written things in the past, but it's different because of the vision of it and how that looks and who the audience is and stuff like that. How does all that differ from you for the audience that may not know the difference? But also, we always say we want this book to be on TV, and then we're like, the book was better when we finally get it on
Sure.
TV. But
Sure.
there's reasons for some stuff that may not meet and get on the screen. So how does that differ for you now that you've done both?
Well, so I mean, the fundamental difference between adaptation and original idea is also part of this conversation, right? Like, when you have so there's actually, the author that is responsible for me and Julie meeting in the first place is a woman called Amy Kaufman. She's a multiple New York Times bestseller. She writes YA sci-fi. And actually, her newest book, which I will plug here, called Isles of the Gods, is out right now, and it is wonderful. She's Australian, and I think it's like the #1 best-selling book in Australia at the moment. She and her sometime collaborator, she's also co-written a bunch of stuff with three different partners. This guy, Jay Kristoff, and she wrote a book called Illuminate. And in 2015, topped the New York Times, yada, yada, yada. And I got hired by Random House to do the male sort of lead voice in that book. And Julie heard that book, and that was around the time that she was being approached with an audiobook contract for the first time. And she requested me for 2 of her books. And that was actually how we met. And the way that ties into this conversation now, this point, is that Amy and I have become friends over the years. And she and I are currently writing a screenplay together, an original idea. And that has been interesting to your question, because she is obviously an astonishingly accomplished novelist and a really, really good storyteller who has also had, I think, half of her books. She's written like 15 books over the past however long, and half of them have been adapted or bought by studios and so forth for adaptation. And so she's not unfamiliar with the process. But when we sat down to start writing the screenplay and she would send me pages, um, it would just be like big paragraph blocks of text on the page. And she'd be like, I don't know how to make this. These are my ideas. I don't know how to make this be a screenplay. And so I would be like, okay, well, here's how you do it. I mean, there's an economy of language at work in writing a screenplay or a TV thing that is absolutely necessary. You have to figure out how to take these big bulky scenes that exist on the page in a novel with lots of description and language and poetry, and distill that down to 3 sentences. So a lot of it is about just figuring out how to do more with less and be as evocative on the page visually as you can. So that's the original idea part of it. The adaptation part of it, and the why don't they just take the book and put it on the screen, which I get, and it's valid, is because if somebody should do that at some point, just to illustrate to an audience how mind-numbingly exhausting that would be. I don't even want to say boring, but it would be, you'd be looking like a 7-hour film. You have to sort of extract the parts that communicate the story in the most engaging way. And I think also, look, I mean, I'm just going to drop dimes here. Here's the reality. If you are dealing with a studio, if it's let's say it's Netflix, and you're dealing with producers and studios or whatever, now you're an author. Let's say you're a self-published author. You're a self-published author. You and maybe the editor you hire are the only people who really get a say in what you put out there. Let's say you're a traditionally published author. Well, okay, now you've got an editor and you've gotten an advance from a major publisher, and you're going to have to listen to some notes and really take those to heart, right? Once you get to the visual medium phase, I mean, you've got producers and then executives above that, and then executives above that. And it becomes, like I said earlier, this corporate thing. And you are now you took the money, right? Like, you took the money and now you are being paid to do a job. And so many people get to have their opinions and voices in on that. And with very few exceptions, obviously, if Stephen King wanted to veto something, he could. If Neil Gaiman wants to veto something, he can. If E.L. James wanted to, dictate some terms, I'm sure that that's on the table. Most people who have their work adapted do not get that kind of say. And so you're serving a lot of masters, and also, I think also, you're trying to mitigate risk. A lot of creating entertainment is about risk mitigation when you're talking about TV and film, because there's millions and millions of dollars on the line. And look, I'm not an advocate for that. I think that the best stuff comes from trusting that the creatives know what they're doing. Side note, and I'll get on my soapbox for a second. I'm in the middle, as we're having this conversation, of a writer's strike, right? The Writers Guild of America, of which I am a member, is on strike for a lot of reasons. Yes, some of them are financial and about fair compensation. But, one of the big sticking points that continues coming up is this AI conversation, because as AI becomes more advanced, and this, by the way, is also a conversation in the audiobook community too.
And the author world, because now they're writing stories. Yeah.
Exactly right. I mean, I think the studios are at the point where, I know we're digressing a little, but I think it's the studio, but I'll circle back after I say that. I think the studios, for example, are really saying, the Writers Guild of America came to the studios and said, one of the things we want in our new contract is a guarantee that you will hire real writers and not AI, as AI continues to develop. And the AMPTP, the guild, the organization that represents the studios, said, LOL, no. And I look, do I think that we are 5 years out, even 10 years out from an AI being able to write a fully endowed, invested piece of art? Probably not. But I do think that we are that length of time away from one being able to create enough of a bare bones that you then bring in someone to, like, human it up a little bit. And they've saved a lot of money and yada yada yada. And I think that we are at a place now too where audiobooks and companies who produce audiobooks are like, well, I mean, for $20 a month, I could just get this AI platform and it could narrate the books. And, there are people who might not dig it, but then, there are also people who might think it's fine. And let's see if we can get away with it. And I think with authoring and all of it. So this is the natural progression of the thing that you were talking about earlier about what happens in the course of creating material from existing material from source IP. You do your best to lean into the most meaningful parts of a story, extract those, put them on the screen, and try and convey the emotion and the feeling and the heart and the whatever. But I think when all of it is stripped down to the most fundamental answer to the question of why does it feel like sometimes this isn't as good as the book or whatever, it's because, and I think this is the argument for why AI can't do the job that creatives do, nothing is as robust as the human imagination. And so when you're reading a book, you are visualizing it. It is deeply personal. It feels like an extremely private experience between you and the words, and all of the imagery and everything that's happening is occurring in your own imagination. And it is fundamentally crafted. It is bespoke. It is a bespoke way to engage with entertainment, crafted to your own experience. And when you're watching something that someone else has manipulated and contorted, you're getting their experience of it. And I think that's why. And nobody goes, well, look, that's not true. There are cynical people out there, but for the most part, I think for the most part, people approach this business of writing books and making movies and creating stories and telling stories with best of intentions, and nobody sets out to piss anybody off, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen. And the I am a masochist, and I read every bit of criticism about everything that I've ever made. I absolutely take it in, and I don't take it in because I want to seek guidance. Like, in other words, I'm not going to change the way I do things because someone says they do or don't like something.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely want to know if writ large, if in the big picture, I am making people feel something that is largely positive or largely negative. Because I think the worst thing that you can do, and now I'm on a tangent that has nothing to do with your question, but I think the worst thing that you can do in art is make something that makes someone go, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the worst sin. It's way worse than I hated this.
Yes, I agree
So,
with that.
so
I've always told because we're voracious readers and we're always like, it comes out today at 12, it got published, and we're done by like 5 o'clock, and we're going to the author. When's the next one coming out? And you're like, it took months.
right.
And we're like, but when's the next one? And sometimes there's been a conversation among the readers about the author's not writing fast enough, or along those lines. And I've always been the one that says, listen, I would much rather wait for a book that I'm going to love and be like wowed at versus having the author rush it and have it be, it's okay.
A friend of mine who's an author was telling a story about a friend of theirs who I don't know, but a writer who had a deal. And what my friend told me was that their friend got to a point where if they had just taken another month with it,
Mm-hmm.
that it probably would have been, chef's kiss, but they felt some weird obligation to wrap it up, and they did, and it came out and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's the different, that extra, is that worth it? Because that's now out there forever.
Yeah.
And if you had taken those extra 4 weeks, no one's going to remember those 4 weeks.
No, we'll wait. It's another
But
book.
right.
Yeah.
But to try and actually answer your question about what the fundamental difference is it's writing for screen and writing a novel really is about stripping. It's just about stripping down.
Mm-hmm.
My first drafts of my screenplays are always like 300 pages. And I need to get them down to, like 105. but I just do the first draft to get everything out there, and then I go back through and I'm like, all right, so what am I actually needing to say, and then what's, I wrote a short film that I directed, and I'm in editing with it right now, and it continues even at that point. I did like 3 drafts of the short script. We got on set, we were shooting it, and I was like, let's cut this. It's not working. The actor wasn't finding it. And now we're in the editing bay, and I just cut over the weekend. I cut another scene from it. So, it's really about stripping it down until you find the leanest, cleanest version of the thing that you want to tell. And I do think that some books do that, right? Like I think that there's in the classic literature world, there's the Hemingway and there's the Faulkner. There's the Faulkner who wanders through the woods and paints all these pictures and language and run-on sentences, or James Joyce or whatever. And then there's the Hemingway, where it's, nice, tight, short sentences that get to the point and deliver. And neither one is invalid. I think it's just about, what feels honest for a writer. Look, obviously, anyone listening to this can tell I'm a fairly loquacious person. No one has ever accused me of using too few words to make a point. But and that's why for me, I have to go back and editorialize my own work so much, because if left to my own devices, I'll write infinite jest and it'll be 1,000 pages long and whatever. And so I want to be thoughtful, but I also, I think as long as you can figure out as a writer, as a storyteller, how to tell the thing that is authentic to you, that's the thing that you should be telling. And finding your own voice is, I think, the hardest thing for most writers to discover. And I think it takes, some people are prodigies and weird that way, but I think for most people, it takes a while to really find their true voice and own it. And I think that a reader, an audience member, whatever, can tell when something's been made just for opportunity and when it's been made out of a real need to tell the story.
Yeah. There's been a few books where I'm like, this could have just been a novella.
Right.
Versus an entire full book. The story would have been better if it would have just been more of a novella. You would have gotten the meat of it. And other times when they'll use certain scenes as fillers, like my pet peeve is when authors use sex scenes as fillers.
So let me ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
As an avid reader, as someone who consumes a lot, do you feel like you have a pretty good bullshit detector for when that kind of thing is going on?
Yeah.
Really?
I do, yeah. And also because I do people watch in the sense of on social media and what they're posting and how they're doing. There's also been times where I'm going, did they use a ghostwriter? Or did someone else pop in? That's also sometimes that's why I was asking about how you guys go about writing the books together, because there's some authors that, like, you guys will take turns or doing solely just the POV. Others will take turns in the chapter. So if that chapter lands in the opposite POV, that's what they're writing at that point. And there are times where they'll mix things together, but I could tell who was writing what, whether it's the dialogue or something got sloppy, or there's someone put a joke that I'm going, yeah, that's not their style or hasn't been their style in previous books and things like that. And sometimes it works, and sometimes I'm going, go back to doing it how you were doing it before, please. But yeah, I think sometimes there's the different types of readers too. Some readers are going to love the book and the story because they love the author. And so it could be a okay book and they're raving about it and it's a 5-star for them, but everything has been a 5-star for them since day one they picked up the book and started reviewing. And there's some of us that might be a little bit more pickier about wanting and needing to have that plot and character development. And I know it's romance, so I know it's going to be a happy ending, but how they get there in that journey is important. And if the story calls for having 15 sex scenes, for an example, okay, great, as long as it's moving the story forward. If you're using it and you're going, again, isn't she sore? It's like, like, you have nothing else to tell me besides letting them at it again. I'm like, I got it. It's the first 16 times that they had sex, that there's chemistry there. But at the same time, I'm going, ouch, I'm like, seriously, dude, really, give me something else. But yeah, I think sometimes it just depends on the person, if they're a mood reader, if that's what they want. Smut right now is really popular, which is formerly known as erotica, call it what it is. And that's just more sex driven than it is plot driven.
Right.
and that's fine and everything, but I'm like, I'm the girl that kind of needs to have more plots than anything.
Right.
Whether it
Right.
fades to black or not is fine. But yeah, it's I can tell. And there's some of you guys are really good that I'll talk to you afterwards and you're like, no, it's just bullshitting that. I'm like, damn, I didn't pick up on that shit because usually I would. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, you did good.
Yeah. Well, that's its own skill set. Like, don't
Yeah.
sneeze at that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of goes into that. But I think too, as because we love the stories, we always want to see how else can we see it or share with others that are not readers. And so when something becomes a TV show or a movie, we're like, oh, we're gonna get to watch it with so and so, and that's just part of that community and wanting to share the love of something that we have passion for. And nowadays it just seems that that's more and more popular, and so I know a lot of authors are looking at, okay, how can I get this to be on the TV screen adaptation, but don't really realize sometimes what they're giving up: control
Sure.
of
Yeah.
their stories. Others have been very fortunate, or we have someone like Passion Flicks that works with the author and is a smaller production company for, making things into movies and TV series, but follow more along the lines of the plot of the book. And so something for everybody kind of a thing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So being that you've done all these different roles within the community, and but now that you're doing the writing as well, knowing that this, for example, the book that's coming out that was brought to you guys as far as in audio first, did that writing style change a little bit, knowing it was going to be in audio versus eyeball reading?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to say I don't think so, but I think the answer is probably yes. And yes, because not only was it brought to us by our audiobook publisher initially, but then we predetermined who we wanted to actually narrate for us. So we decided that, I mean, I narrate all of the stuff that we write together. Previous to now, I've done it under my romance novel pseudonym, and I'm actually narrating the Robro under my name, which the book is very meta. So you'll see when one listens to it or reads it, like that ties into the actual narrative of the book. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we chose to do that. But beyond me, this wonderful narrator, Ann Pepperidge, an actor that I've known from my New York theater days, who narrated the two previous rom-coms that Julie and I wrote together. And she's just got killer comic timing and just really knows what she's doing. And then we had a third sort of God voice and a third person omniscient set of chapters that exist outside of the space and time of the two main characters. And we knew we wanted Julia Whalen for that. And we got her, which is not necessarily a foregone conclusion. To your point earlier, Julia says no to a lot. And so we were able to get Julia to come aboard. So knowing that it was going to be very much my voice, knowing it was going to be Anne's voice and Julia's voice, yes, I think we did try and write to that to a degree. What is interesting, of course, in this iteration of what we've done is historically, as I've written the characters that I would ultimately voice myself, the POVs that I would give voice to, Julie wrote the character that I am giving voice to. And I will say that not only did it affect, I think, to a greater or lesser degree, just our consciousness of making it audio friendly, but when I was narrating it, it was a different experience than narrating the books that she and I have written together before. Because even though I read every chapter as they were being written and played an important role in crafting it and shaping it, it's not like the words lived in my brain the same way they do when I created them from scratch. And so even though I had read the book 5 times or whatever, I was like, oh, right, I totally forgot about this because because it wasn't mine to do. That said, I think, I think Julie does a good job of the reason she has a stable of narrators that narrate her stuff over and over again. I think a lot of people do is for audiobooks, if you're an author, you find a person whose voice comports to your voice in the most impactful way. And then you try and just work with them over and over and over again. So Julie now writes in a variety of different styles too. That's the other thing, is she's like Colleen Hoover in that way. She doesn't just write sort of one thing. And so she knows if she's going to write this kind of erotica, maybe she wants this narrator or their voice. If she's going to write, a rom-com, she's got the person that she goes to for that. And so I think that mitigates the need to write for them, because you can just write for you and know that they know what to do with it because they have experience with it. And so in this case, I think it was a little bit from column A, a little from column B, is that we were conscious, but just like reading reviews that are that are maybe, glowing or not, you try not to let them get to you. So I think we put aside the idea we need to make it be X or Y thing, and just trusted that we know what we're doing enough that when it gets into the narrator's hands, that they will understand how to deliver it. And also, we're very collaborative. If they have questions, if a narrator has questions for any of the stuff that we've written, well, I can ask myself, but the other narrators,
Sorry, it's not a visual.
we have listen, I'm mildly schizophrenic, so but it's an open door that we have, and we always invite that conversation. And that's the thing I really also like about working with our audiobook publisher, who I will plug here, Podium Audio. And anybody who listens to a lot of audiobooks knows them. They're fantastic. They're super inviting. There are places that don't really want the authors and the narrators to have a bunch of back and forth. That is not the case with these guys. They're pretty great. So it feels like it's a real. I mean, they're a major corporation. They're worth however much they're worth. They produce all these audiobooks, yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, somehow we all have managed to maintain a feeling of, let's just roll up our sleeves and go. My uncle has a barn, and let's go put on a play, you guys. And I think that feeling of like rough and tumble, like let's make something together, yields a really good product. And so we I don't know. I feel like excluding the people who are going to be ultimately working with you is not a good policy. So yeah, I think that writing for audio first and knowing it was going to be audiobook produced right from jump was something that we wanted to pay careful attention to.
I'm excited. When you guys revealed the cover and the blurb.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, I like the cover. I'm like, okay, good. Okay, we're going cartoon. Okay, good. And then I read the blurb and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. Because
you want to tell us about it?
You know what? Here's the thing. If I'm worried again, I am a free talker, so I am worried that I'll say the wrong thing. So why don't you tell people what you read, and then I'll know what's out there, because I can't always remember what's already been revealed and what hasn't.
Got it. Okay, so I know from Julie's post, it's like it's authors gone wild. Readers stage a revolt, book talkers, bookstagrammers, and a dream date planned by an AI concierge at the biggest romance event of the year. And the best part, you don't even need to have a ticket to attend.
Right.
So it's one of those where you guys were throwing. Seems like there's a lot of different things from a reader's perspective. They were going, oh, so we have S.C. Smith Scott, who's an author known as SS, which again with pseudonyms and all those things are always kind of fun to kind of play with those.
Right.
Has been the #1 spicy romance writer in the world for the past 10 years. Movie deals, merchandise, dozens of books on the New York Times bestselling list, and the founder of the biggest romance convention to ever hit the planet. I'm going, I might know them. Yeah, scoring an invitation to the Sin With Us romance convention in Las Vegas is the big break every romance author hopes for, and Cynthia Lear names just made it to the top of the wait list. Again, something I know all about from the author's world. She's in, and she's gonna make the most of it. This is her chance to shine and propel her career to the stratosphere. But then she meets Essie's twin brother, Steve. Not only is Steve Smith handsome and charming and loves her work, he's also lying to the whole world, literally everyone, because his twin sister, Essie, isn't the one who's writing all those super spicy master choke books all these years. It's Steve.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean,
that's the blurb, and I'm going, I want it.
Yeah. It does, and look, I mean, talk about anybody who's already a fan of Julie's or has read the stuff that we've written together. I mean, there are Easter eggs. Like, I can't talk about a lot of them, but one of them is in the blurb. Like the Sin With Us convention, the convention that we named the Sin With Us convention. The very first book that Julie and I wrote together is called Sin With Me. So, like, we already were aping our own material right from jump. I mean, it's really, really fun. It's really. it's should I can I plug my own thing?
Absolutely.
It's really fucking funny. Like it's really funny. Um and the thing that I love about writing comedy with Julie is that she's known historically as this really dark, twisty writer. And she is, but she's also goddamn funny. And like her rhythm and her sense of timing is really, really good. And so, this is about a writer who writes really, really dark shit, but the book itself is a comedy. And so this is another way that we found like, all right, how can we take from our real story and put it into the book? And I talk a little about this in the author's note at the end, but or what Julie created early on in her career, the EOBS, the end of book shit is what she called it. So in the end of book shit, I do write a little about this, but I'll say it here too. I mean, the reason we got approached is because we've worked with Podium now for however long, and they know us really well. They knew that part of our story that I haven't talked about here is that when we were not able to ultimately get Julie's existing books that I had optioned and written the thing that they had optioned and written a thing for, set up as a TV series. There were lots of people around this town being Hollywood, when I would go in and pitch the book series. The Company is what it was called, and they're based on a series of books that Julie wrote called the Rook and Ronan books. Every single person was like, I love this concept. This is really cool. Let us talk about it. But before you go, so you're a guy and you're married to a woman and you live in LA, and there's this romance writer and she lives in wherever she lives on her ranch, and you two write romance novels together, and you're this like big, local, like, highly verbal TV actor, and she's this reclusive, shadowy romance. That's the show I want to see. And so we actually sold that. We got someone to pay us to write that. So I wrote 3 different versions of a TV show fictionalizing my writing partnership with Julie and our writing relationship together. In the TV version, obviously, it was going to be a more traditional rom-com, like friends to lovers, lovers to enemies to lovers, kind of blah, 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 blah. But that then kind of ran its course. And when Podium reached out, they said, how much of that stuff can you steal from yourselves without us getting sued? Like, can we do the book version of that? And I was like, well, no, because someone else owns that material. But let us talk about the versions of our real experience that we can draw from and put into this book, and what the funniest, most interesting, most romantic comedy version of that is. And so there is a lot of stuff inspired by, there are names of real people in the book. There are things that we've done in the book. There are real character traits about both of us in the book, in the characters. They are their own unique thing. But that also made it a lot of fun to do. And I think that comes through. And of course, the upside to doing something like that is, for somebody who's a super fan or really knows Julie's work, they're going to get all the jokes. They're going to get all the inside references, and it's going to just be a treat. And then the goal, of course, is you also want to make something that if someone doesn't get all of those inside jokes, that it's still, a super entertaining thing. And I think that because Julie and I have such interesting perspectives on the world of romance novels, her from coming from the ground up and starting right when it was really, the self-published part of it especially was really taking off, and me coming into it from an outsider's perspective, I think that we represent a lot of different voices and opinions. And then the fact that we're going to release it the week of Book Bonanza, and the entire book happens to be set at a book convention, is just a happy coincidence. But super fun. And yeah, it's also, by the way, Julie Huss wrote that blurb because she was like, "You want a shot at the blurb?" I'm like, "No, you're the fucking blurb master. Like, write the blurb." She just understands how to get right to the heart of a thing. It's interesting. We were talking before about how do you distill out. I mean, writing a blurb
Oh gosh, yeah.
kind of uses the same skill set that you use when you're adapting a screenplay. It's like, how do you take this 300 and something page thing and get it down to the essential elements? And that's a really hard thing to learn how to do too. And Julie just happens to be good at all of it. Like, I would also like to, just for anybody who doesn't know Julie's work, she does the cover art herself. She writes the blurbs. she is a one-person publishing industry. And if she ever wanted to actually be a publisher, I'm sure she'd do incredibly well at it, but that would require her having to deal with lots of other people. And I do not think that is something that is that she's eager to do by her own admission. She just wants
Hmm.
to write books and, tell good
Be left
stories.
alone.
But yeah. But so yeah, I mean, that's that. I'm so grateful that we were given the opportunity to do something in this world, because doing a piece about the world that brought us together just feels like a really appropriate way to pay homage to this experience that we've shared. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know that there's always the announcements of, books being written or it's coming out, or they'll share the cover and the blurb and stuff like that. This is the first book in a little while that I was like, holy shit, I want it.
Oh, nice. Well, that's nice to
Yeah.
hear. That's
Yeah.
nice to hear.
It was just being part of going to the conventions and working with some of the authors that who they really are versus their pseudonym. And same thing with you guys as narrators. It's one of those where you kind of get to see the insiders but also behind the scenes of things. And yeah, it's one of those like this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I
How it
hope
was
so. I hope so.
portrayed.
Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
You working with words all day long, whether it's writing it and or narrating things. What's your favorite word?
I have two. My favorite word, well, and so in the English language we're talking about, right?
Like actually, it doesn't really matter because a lot of times people have been because they're bilingual or trilingual and or have other backgrounds that they have words from other places. So
Yeah. I do speak a couple of other languages, but on the spot, I think better in English. So I guess so I'll just stick with that for the moment. But my two favorite English words are insouciant, because I just love the very concept of what it means. That this idea of, and it is an onomatopoeia, right? It is like it feels like what it is, carefree and effortless and easy. And then to that end, my other favorite word is mellifluous. I think it's beautiful. Also, I just love the way like it looks on when you write it, and the way the F comes around with the S and the U and the I so those are my two. What are yours?
oh, serendipity is one that
Mm,
I like,
hmm
and then another one it's in Spanish. It's like querida, like cherished one. So,
Oh, that's lovely.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, this is one of those where it's like it can mean so many different things, which is also why when it comes down to like the love stuff and even the emotional side, I tend to go more with the Spanish words just because there's significantly more levels. In English, we're like, I like you and I love you.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know? And in Spanish, there's a
yeah.
bunch of different ones kind of categorizing where you fit into this and how much you mean to me or how much you don't mean to me.
Right.
It's very fun. What about your favorite curse word?
Oh, fuck. Like, no question. By a wide margin. By a wide fucking margin. I easy peasy. I use it all the time. And it's interesting. I narrate some sci-fi fantasy stuff that is lit RPG, which is a subgenre, right? And there are I was recently on one of the message boards about, I can't remember which site, but someone talking about how do you, something to the effect of, how do you feel when authors use profanity liberally? Do you feel like it is covering up their inability to find a more appropriate word? Does it feel lazy? And I think that at the end of the day, that words are, look, at the end of the day, I think words are a shitty communicator. Just like you were pointing out, there are so many different words to express this concept, because some concepts are fundamentally inexpressible. Um, some, I think is it traditional Tibetan doesn't have a word for hate, right? Because the fundamental ethos of that doesn't allow for it and so forth. So I think that words are a shitty communicator. So I want to use all of them at my disposal. And I think that like swearing, if you can marshal the forces of it and create the right intent behind it, and because fuck can mean something cruel, it can mean something funny, it can mean, and I think that it just has, and the fact that people respond to it so viscerally, and it means it's provocative and it's doing something right. In the second book that Julie and I wrote together, there is a scene where one of our characters, whether he is really dead or whether he is just imagining that he is dead, he has a conversation with God. And in the conversation he has with God, God is swearing a fucking blue streak. And he's like, fucking this and cocksucking that and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, any more motherfucking questions? And the guy, our hero, goes, just or anything else you want to say? And our hero goes, just one thing. You swear a lot more than I thought you would. And what God says, and I remember when I wrote it, I sat back. It just spilled out, and I sat back, and I was like, oh, this is my new credo. I didn't know that this. I channeled something, and God says, they're just words. I didn't invent them. You assholes did. They only mean something if you give them meaning, right? And so these things only are given meaning by virtue of us endowing them with that value set. And so for me, it's like there's just something that when I use the word fuck, that just feels so it just feels so satisfying, and it feels like I can breathe again. And also, I would add that that I it, that it's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adverb, it's an adjective. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
How I use it.
yeah, it's fucking perfect. So yeah, so it is my favorite word. I was talking about words the other day with someone because I was taught I was asked to teach an acting class last year, and I did. This is completely off topic, but I think it's interesting. These kids are all in their early 20s. They just got to LA. They're all striving to do whatever, right? And I found myself two things. One, I feel like I'm a pretty plugged in cat who keeps up with what's going on in the world. They were using, I didn't know I was like, what the fuck is Riz?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? The fuck is that? What do you mean? So there was that. And then the other thing was, there are things that historically I have said very flippantly, words that I've kind of used that I think are funny or concepts or whatever. And I'm like, I know that there is a certain sensitivity that these young people would have to me saying this thing, which I fucking love because it forces me to continue to evolve in my own modes of expression. And I actually think that being conscious of the way that language evolves and the way we communicate and what is in vogue and what's not and how fashion works and it'll or what's in fashion and what isn't allows us to continue pushing. And as someone who does work with words, I like you said a moment ago, there's less words to express X concept in English, love and hate or whatever. I love you, I like you, at this or that. I would counter with I adore you. I yearn for you. I need you. These are all words that we can apply, right? And I think that compelling ourselves to figure out how to express ourselves more precisely, more thoughtfully, with a greater degree of sensitivity, with a greater degree of earnestness, is a really exciting and wonderful thing. And I think that I don't know. I think that so much opportunity to find entertainment, back to the thesis of this conversation, to find the reason that I enjoy doing so many things is just that many more opportunities to reach that many more people, which in turn informs my experience of being alive. I touch more, and it's a really exciting time because I don't know, there's never been a time in history when you can make an impact on this many people and have this many people make an impact on you. You and I found each other because of the way the world is constructed now. We never would have found it. And it's such an exciting time. And I think that the reason that by the way, this wasn't asked, but it's, I think, intrinsic in what we're talking about. The reason that I was ultimately drawn to romance and said yes is because the stories are about hope, and they are about fantasy, and they are about happily ever afters, and they are about finding the good in things at the end of the day, and those are the stories that I'm far and away the most interested in telling. And they have fucking in them. And that's my favorite word. So it all works out really well.
Yeah. Yeah. You also bring up a good point about ways of expressing, like you were saying, like I burn for you, I yearn for you. Um, Funny how we sometimes think of those more from a physicality of my, defining the love or the like, and then getting to that point, there's just something more. I think Bridgerton now has kind of ruined or
Mm,
allowed us to kind of think more about how to go about expressing the I love you to be more meaningful, to truly express the whole like I burn for you, or
hmm
the most recent one with Charlotte's is my heart calls for you. It's just the ways
mm.
to kind of express it. I'm going, oh, okay, that's a good way. I'm like, who do I feel about that? Okay.
It just, I wrote a love letter to my wife in one of the EOBSs, because it was like, hell, I have the opportunity, and these are books about romance, and and one of the things I said in there was, she is the reason that I see color.
Hmm.
That was the best way that I could think to express like how I feel about my love for her, is right. Like,
Yeah.
she allows me to see color in the world. Like, she brings the world from gray and black and white into full technicolor luminosity, and like that. I think that there are so many ways to express. People are so much. I think there's so many ways to express a feeling, and I think that it is weirdly very easy for people to express their dissatisfaction. I think
Yes.
there and I think that if we put a little more effort into finding ways to express the things that we love, that we would all slow down a little, and maybe love a little bit more. Which is, by the way, super fucking woo woo. And I know that, like, whatever, but it's really how I feel, and it's actually why I love being part of the romance world,
Yeah.
because everybody that I've met in it cares about the same things in a really real way, and they get excited in a really, like, the enthusiasm when I meet readers or they reach out to me online or whatever. It just touches my heart. It's like, wow, I'm doing something good here, and that feels like it's a really good thing.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I love the community so much and have stuck around as much as I have, is that at the end of the day, regardless of what our background, our history is, where we're from, the one thing we have in common is we have that hope for that HEA at the end of
Yeah,
of the story.
yeah, yeah.
And, we have so many different things in romance, whether it's the kink or the location, or if it's a fade to black versus more spicy stuff. And we all are, for the most part, I want to say, because there's always one or two bad apples, but for the majority of the part, we are all acceptant of everybody and everything. And we're more in, having to have everyone join. Like, we don't, there's not a whole lot of gatekeeping.
Right.
You feel safe to ask the question in the community of, hey, I'm thinking about this. Where can I get? And then the recommendations are like hundreds of pages long. And where else can you
Right.
get that kind of like, community building that doesn't happen really outside of that. So it's always fun
Yeah,
to be
it's
able to
really
do that.
beautiful.
It
Yeah,
is,
you
yeah.
should know, you're the Enchantress of Books. You should know these things.
Well, that's kind of how that name came about, honestly. Because it was one
Really?
of
How?
those, yeah, just kind of thinking about where I would fit into the community and what I thought and felt my role was in the community. And I kind of like the whole like the what books are magical. I'm like, okay, good, they're magical. What about it? Where do I fit? I'm like, well, I'm like the one that can combine everything and everyone together and showcase that. So enchanting everyone
I,
with the different books,
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah. The witch, this just didn't sound right.
it. The
you
Book
know,
Witch,
the book
Viviana the
witch.
Book Witch. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Different,
it's
different image.
yes,
Different image.
exactly. Enchantress just sounds a lot more too. Also, how you say it, right? The words and how
Absolutely.
it flows. Yeah. Plus, it also does look pretty in certain fonts. So I was like,
There you
yeah,
go. I
yep.
love it. I love
It's
it.
all these things that you think about. Can I ask how many languages you do speak and what they are?
Sure. I speak English, French, and serviceable Italian and Spanish. So all Romance languages. I'm actually half Greek, but I wasn't raised with my very long story. I won't go into it, but I only connected over the pandemic with my Greek family, like my cousins. I finally met them all after all these years, and we're now friends. And they speak Greek, and I was like, oh boy, I should learn how to speak Greek as well. And they were like, you don't want to take that on if you didn't learn it as a child. They're like, you just don't. And a friend of mine was just in Tokyo for a few months working on a project, and he came back speaking some Japanese. And I was like, oh, maybe I should. He's like, you don't want to, don't even. He's like, unless you're really gonna go and live there, don't. It's not, don't do it. So So that's it. Romance languages feel Latinate based languages are the ones that speak okay. How about you? Are you multilingual? Obviously.
English is my first and primary language. Spanish,
Right.
it takes me a week to read a paragraph because we were very Americanized. And then because of the Spanish, I can understand Portuguese and Italian. And
Ah,
I
yeah,
speak a little
sure.
bit of it as, the Italian more so than the Portuguese. But yeah, it's just something I've always wanted to, but I'm also a learner. So I would dive in. And
Yeah,
as everything I've ever done, and which is where I wear the multiple roles in the industry kind of thing, it kind of all started as a that sounds interesting. How can I help? And bam, subject matter
sure.
experts and businesses.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
That's curiosity, not judgment.
Yeah.
That is my go-to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's personally why I'm not picking up making epoxy resin stuff because I will probably end up making a business out of it because I don't do anything half-assed. But because of that learner though, I'm always enthusiastic about how people think, why do they do things, where did this story come from, why did you decide to make it that way versus this way,
Mm,
and just also I trust in the author and the narrator's performances and their writing. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's where you want to go. Cool. Let's take me through the journey and
I love
just
that.
enjoy that process. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to interact with the work as opposed to I'm not saying that this is the wrong way. It just feels like if I'm the kind of person who is looking for the thing that doesn't meet my expectations, then I'm already setting myself up to be disappointed.
Oh
And
yeah.
so going in open like that is just, I think, the open vessel way of approaching consuming entertainment is the healthier way, and it's going to lead to a better experience.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has made a joke the other day that I loved, which was like, um, I said, "So what's your favorite?" He's like, "I'm a cinephile. I'm a cinephile. I've seen every movie. I study films. I was like, "So what's your favorite movie?" He goes, "Oh, I hate all movies." And it was kind of a joke, but I'm like, yeah, you talk about gatekeeping. It's like that person who's like, I know everything about music and I know all the time signatures and I know whatever and whatever, and that's why I hate every single song I hear. I'm like, fair enough. Go, you do you, but I'd rather just be happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I try to find the joy in anything and everything I do. Otherwise, it's not worth doing.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's the moment that I'm like, what else can I learn if I'm
I
not
love it.
having fun at it? And it's just how my brain works, and it's always just moving into something different. And everything has there's always something in common. A very creative process of everything. I like the creativity of it and being able to express myself. And even if it's through other people's work, it's
Mm,
always joyful.
that's beautiful. I
Mm,
love that. I'm stealing
thanks.
that.
Okay.
I'll credit you, but I'm stealing that. That's great.
No, it's great. Hey, people have stole from me before, no worries. Like I said, there's always a few bad apples, but I can still make a
Sure.
great apple pie with the apples that are there that are still
There
good.
you go. There
So
you go.
that's what it is. One of the things I do love doing with my guests, aside from getting to know them so much better in these kind of conversations, is to play the game of two truths and a lie, where you tell me three things about yourself and we're going to figure out which one's the lie. Also, see how good you are as far as lying. But then again, y'all are actors, so yeah.
Right. Okay. Let me see. Well, I've already talked about so much about myself in this thing.
It was the point.
Let me yeah, yeah. Let me think here. Let me think. All right. So two truths and a lie. I have never ridden a motorcycle. I have only been out of the country one time. And when I was a child, I wanted more than anything in the world to be a firefighter.
Hmm. Okay. So never ridden a motorcycle, never been outside of the country except for that one time. And as a
Hmm.
child, wanted to be nothing more than just a firefighter.
Hmm.
Okay. Hmm. Details.
And
On this.
also, like I
Uh-huh.
fucked it up. I fucked it up. I did two lies and a truth. So I already fucked it up right from the start. So
Okay, well,
Here's the thing, and I'll tell everybody. I'll talk about the truth. Viviana sent me an email letting me know that that's one of the things she would ask, and I totally forgot to prepare. So that's part of the reason I'm caught up short right now, is that I completely got distracted because I have 6 careers and totally forgot to prepare. So
and as someone that knows and understands that, I'm not going to fault you for it. It's fine.
thank you. I appreciate
So
that.
we're going to flip the script, and in the sense of we're going to figure out the truth. Which one's the truth? Instead of the lie.
Right.
So no worries there. Never been on a motorcycle is the truth.
I used to own a motorcycle, so
Okay.
so no.
Okay. All right.
I wanted to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Like that's like I want like I the guy in the first books that we wrote, the first 4 books that Julie and I wrote are all about firefighters, and I talk about how much I revere them and love them. Like I think that they are the best of us. And yeah, when I was a kid, that was the thing. I just wanted to be a firefighter so much. And and then I set fire to my backyard.
Oh no. Were you trying
Because
to put it out?
I thought I could put it out, but I couldn't. And then we had to call the fire department. And
Oh my goodness.
and I was like, yeah, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe what I actually wanted to be was a pyromaniac. I don't know. I can't.
Maybe.
So,
Yeah, I figured the whole traveling was a lie. And
yeah,
the
I know. Again,
motorcycle was a little bit like, okay, I kind of California dude, and maybe
I
even
know.
if it's an acting and position kind of thing, he probably had to do it, even if it's for a little block or not even a full block. But
Well,
the
I'm
firefighter.
rifling through as you said it, and I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to prepare this, and then I'm rifling through my mind about like what things can I not be sued for, and say out loud, and came up empty. So that's on me.
Yeah.
So.
No, you're good. You're
All
good.
right, good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but yeah, I think that firefighter is did you have someone in your life that was a firefighter that you were also like looking?
No, I don't know what it is. No,
Huh.
I just really, I just thought it was, maybe I read a story or something, and then, you know, if it wasn't already ingrained, I was in New York on 9/11. I was actually supposed to catch a flight to LA that morning. Um, yeah, I know. I was on my way to the airport when it all went down. And I lived in Hell's Kitchen, and one of the Hell's Kitchen departments was one of the ones that like lost everybody. And I don't know, those guys, I just, that really cemented it for me, and so it's been a lifelong thing. And I think I just respond. I mean, I feel this way about people who do service, people who go into service for others. I feel this way about military vets. I feel this way about anyone who gives of themselves. And look, I'm not saying that everybody's a fucking saint, right? I've met some douchebag firefighters,
Oh
but
yeah.
but I think conceptually,
Yes.
the act of it writ large is just an act of selfless generosity. And my sister's husband, who you and I were talking before we started recording, who is he's an FBI agent, and before that he was in the Air Force. His father was the fire marshal of the town that they grew up in, and so that's a family who's just steeped in the idea of giving to to serve and to whatever. And just reinforced over the years my belief about the integrity of doing something like that. I don't know. I just really admire it. I think that as a kid too, I thought, I want to do something that's of service. And interestingly, as much as I do what I do because I'm an attention whore and I have a big ego and all that shit, and it's all true, there is a part of me that is like, this is the way that I can serve. This is the way that I can, create something for people that gives them something that they. It's like that line in Dead Poet Society, which shows my age, but there's a line in the 1989 film Dead Poet Society that Robin Williams has where he's like, lawyers, doctors, etc. These are all noble professions and necessary to sustain life. But art, poetry, love, these are the things we stay alive for. And so, for me, I just sort of pivoted my, okay, I'm not going to save lives, but as long as people are still here, how can I give them the best experience of being on the planet as I can? And that was, sort of where. So that's kind of like how all of my interests dovetailed. Although shit, still, I still every day think like, I don't know. Like if I see a movie about lawyers, I'm like, maybe I should go to law school. Like I definitely, me doing all these things is like you. It's like I can't get my toe into it because if I do, then the next thing
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm
You're a
gonna be
learner.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
also, I mean, we're talking about like, it may not save lives, but I've known a lot of folks that have been in bad spots, taking care of their loved ones in the hospital that were dying, and or taking care of a child, hoping that they make it out of the cancer treatments, being in, looking for work and being unemployed and just trying to figure out what's the next step. And reading these books and being part of this community has helped them keep their sanity,
Mm.
and be able to provide them with that bit of hope or that escapism to just be able to just be. So it's important. I think it's a good kind of work to be doing, and knowing that there are people out there that really reading these stories have helped them just be moving forward is truly a gift that we can
Yeah.
provide. Yeah.
Yeah. It means a lot.
Yeah. I know it's a noble profession, firefighters. I remember thinking how awesome they were, career day in elementary school with the big flashy, trucks and the lights and the heavy equipment. But I'm like,
Yeah.
you all are purposely running into the fire.
Yeah. 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 If I start going on about it, I start to get a little weepy. But yeah, that's exactly right.
So it's just one of those, I'm like, I admire them. Same thing with police officers and teachers and things like that. So anytime that I can help, or when the stories are about them and second chances or finding their love, and I'm like, that's awesome. That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we go, can you tell us what you're currently working on and what's coming up next for you in any of your major hats that you wear?
Sure. Sure. Well, like I say, we got the two books coming out. On writers, I was actually in the middle of some screenplay stuff, but I'm on a writer's strike, so I don't have a clear answer now for when that will end and those things will move forward. But I think I've had a weirdly busy year narrating. So I've got, if you go to Audible and just type my name in and spell it the weird way I spell it, JOHNATHANMCCLAIN, because if you leave out that first H, you'll never find me. But if you go to Audible and type it in, you can see that I think I've got like 10 books coming out in the next 2-3 months, and then I've still got like 5 more to narrate in the next couple months. So it's going to be a big year for audiobooks for me. So I've got that happening. If this strike ends with any kind of reasonable time frame, I can't talk about it specifically because whatever, but there's a Netflix thing that I'm working on, maybe writing. Got that. And then just a bunch of stuff cooking behind the scenes. I've got this short film that I wrote that I'm going to finish editing and try and do the festival submission thing with, and probably put it up online. So, if you follow me on any of my platforms, you'll be able to see. It's called Pirouette. It's a two-hander. The younger actress is an up-and-coming actress called Emma Maltby, who's just came back from Atlanta doing a big Netflix film, and she's going to be a thing. But the other sort of star is my old friend Bellamy Young, who played Melly on Scandal, played the president, and is just one of the best people and best actors I know. It's just a little 17-minute 2-character piece that I'm really proud of. And so, if you, like I say, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm out there. Find me and you'll be able to know about that. What else do I have going on? I'm gonna go to Paris for a little while towards the end of the year, which isn't anything you can watch, but if you're in Paris, I'll be there, and feel free, and we'll go get a scone together or something. Yeah, I mean, just I make plans, and then I just try and take one step after the next and see where the day takes me. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Perfect. Yeah, lots of fun stuff coming up. I'm looking here on Audible and excited about some of these titles. I'm like, yay. I'm like, ooh, didn't think about wanting that one, but maybe I'll check it out. It's always
Cool.
a fun
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's an array. It's an array of different genres, but thus far I've not had a clunker in the bunch, so I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about
Good.
all of them doing well. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being part of this year's Audiobook Loving Series. It's been fun.
You're amazingly good at this, Viviana. I've done a bunch of these things. I just looked at the clock and I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta
Yeah.
go. I've got like a meeting. Like, you're very good at this job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Everyone, thanks for hanging out with us today. And we hope you've enjoyed this chat as well as the series. I'll make sure to include all of his social media information so you can follow him if you have not as of yet. And you can find that information over at the landing page of the Audiobook Lovin Series at Viviana, Enchantress of Books. And until next time, happy listening.
A special thank you to authors DJ Krimmer, Tana Stone, Landon Beach, PJ Fiala, and all of our sponsors of the Audiobook Lovin 2023 series.
Visit today's episode post to listen to sound clips of some of the books we discussed and enter the month-long giveaway. If you enjoyed the Audiobook Lovin podcast series and you want more, join the Audiobook Lovin podcast Patreon for early access to podcasts, exclusive content like the Would You Rather game and dinner party guests, and additional incentives such as bloopers, graphics, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. Thank you for joining Viviana and her guests for this podcast, and we hope you tune in again as we continue to celebrate Audiobook Month. The Audiobook Lovin Series is hosted by Viviana, the Enchantress of Books. Please make sure to visit the main page linked within the post to learn more about the entire Audiobook Lovin Series and the enchanting author and narrator guests who have joined us over the years. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a review wherever you listened, and please follow us on social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana, the Enchantress of Books newsletter. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you have enjoyed this program.